When I was young, my mother wanted her children to see The Night of the Proms on TV. No, I am not English at all, but what she actually was teaching us was national pride. I still remember how Rule Britannia filled the hall, how it could make your hair stand up with pride, even if you weren't English yourself. Because what you felt was not just about Britain. It was the might and power of belonging to your culture. The pride of centuries of expression, of scientific achievements, of resilience and purpose. My mother gave me another gift, curiosity for my own heritage. As a child, I went to every one of the 20 or so museums in my town. I wanted to see them all. I wanted to understand what Flanders had meant through the ages, the painters, the merchants, the inventors, the ordinary people whose lives and struggles had shaped the land I stood on. That's when I realized national pride isn't an invention. It's something buried deep inside us, waiting to be uncovered when we connect to our history. You can feel it in music. You can feel it in art. You can feel it standing in a cathedral, even if you reject the faith that built it. The devotion, the belief, the sheer effort of people who worked their whole lives on a single tower. That deserves respect. It is proof that when people are united by a purpose, they can achieve something that outlives them. This is what nationalism in its truest form really is. Not arrogance, not exclusion, not even politics, but belonging. The knowledge that you are part of a long story and that your duty is to carry it forward. Something immigrants need time to appreciate and incorporate. We have forgotten this. Bureaucracy, globalization, and cynicism have eroded the pride that once held us together. We have been told pride is dangerous, that borders are outdated, that culture belongs in museums rather than in daily life. But the truth is, the feeling never died. It is still under our skin. So I believe democracy, as we practice it, has weakened that pride. 50 years ago as a kid, I remember tens, maybe hundreds of thousands once filling the streets, shouting, "Long live the King," when he visited our city. 10 years later, the cry had become Belgium break, something unthinkable only a decade before. How could such loyalty dissolve so quickly? Was it free speech, the revolts of the 60s, the unhealed wounds of the war? No. The fracture lies deeper, in democracy itself. This video introduces a book that explores where that fracture runs and how we might mend it. It asks what an improved democracy could look like if it rebuilt cultural belonging instead of eroding it. Not through nostalgia or slogans, but through a system that restores sovereignty and accountability to the people. Double democracy. A democracy where governments can be ended by citizens at any moment, and where leaders no longer drift from election to election, but serve under the constant judgment of those they represent. Democracy is a system. It attempts to empower people in the construction of the society they live in, and it worked. But only as long as society remained simple, media remained somewhat neutral, and the economy was not steered by ideological laws that theoretically could keep the ship afloat. An idea that worked until time caught up. Global trade was enhanced by technological advancement. Communication reached light speed, and the loopholes all this created were more and more abused for personal gain, power, and control. And eventually, when governmental borrowing far outgrew corporate borrowing. To counter this, ideologies were imposed across the world, yet not a single one ever worked. Technocracy, socialism, neoliberalism, communism, fascism, even raw nationalism, all failed for the same reason. They put abstract blueprints above lived reality. People were squeezed to fit the model rather than the model serving them. A child knows that a square cannot be forced into a circular hole. Why then do we continue to try? History shows that when pressure mounts, people eventually rise, revolutions erupt. Too often, however, the people's cry for justice is hijacked by those with ready-made ideologies. The revolution is real. The ideology that follows is the betrayal. When people resist on valid grounds, what is the point of forcing them into imaginary systems that promise paradise but demand conformity to what everyone knows will not work? Common sense tells us these experiments must fail. Today, Europe is sinking into a marsh of false promises. Politicians impose ever more authoritarian measures in the name of keeping peace, while wealth flows upward to giant corporations. Power is centralized. The middle class is hollowed out. Small businesses are destroyed by laws written for factories. And banking rules like the Basel Accords make it nearly impossible for the little man to build or grow a business. Only the giants thrive. What is called socialism today is not truly social. Real social life is found elsewhere, in culture, in heritage, in the belonging that arises when people see themselves as part of a living story. That is cultural nationalism. It is not a political doctrine, but a social movement, the music that moves us, the traditions that bind us, the respect for what our forebears built. Ideologies demand conformity. Cultural nationalism asks only recognition. And it is this recognition of who we are and where we come from that democracy should protect. Instead, our democracies have allowed ideologies to hollow it out. The book I introduce argues for a renewal, double democracy, a system designed to safeguard sovereignty and accountability through national cultural awareness, so that belonging can flourish without being twisted into control. You may wonder why national cultural awareness is not political. In fact, it is nothing new. It is as old as cathedrals, as markets, as songs sung in the square. It has only been smothered by bureaucrats, by ideologues, by those who feared its strength. Double democracy is not about inventing a new creed. It is about giving people back what they always had or were promised. The right to belong, the right to speak, the right to end a government that betrays them. In fact, the UK has long been an excellent example of how national cultural awareness worked until it joined the EU and adapted its policies. People from all backgrounds were waving British flags, proud to be part of something larger than themselves, chanting together at the night of the proms. But political parties hijacked national cultural awareness and turned it into politics. In Flanders, people became ashamed to call themselves Flemish by the end of last century because extremists during the Second World War had poisoned the word. Singing Flemish songs was condemned as nationalist. Raising the Flemish banner was deemed offensive. Simply being Flemish bordered on being fascist. Yet this was the land of Rubens, one of the most famous painters in the world, of Antwerp, home to the first great commercial printers, of Bruges, once the Venice of the North, whose tapestries were the finest in Europe. The list goes on. But none of it mattered. Everything Flemish was branded suspect. This is what Karl Marx wanted. He was fundamentally anti-culture. Marxism reduces people to classes and strips away everything else that makes them human: family, language, heritage, faith, tradition, art. Pride in culture was rewritten as shame, independence recast as conformity. Marx called culture a superstructure, something to be dismantled. And history shows that wherever Marxism has advanced, identity has been smothered and culture reduced to either a commercial attraction or a relic behind glass. But not all ideologies are political. The world was not just politically influenced. Keynesian economics promised stability, so long as its rules were followed. But like every ideology, it concealed dogma beneath a mask of science. And even though Keynesian economics today is still treated by many as financial science, when in truth it is an ideology, one that assumes infinite growth, endless debt, and permanent state intervention. This ideology now drives the collapse of the financial system as surely as Marxism still drives the collapse of societies. They reinforce each other, and double democracy is not another ideology, it is the opposite. A structure designed to prevent ideology from capturing power again. This video is an invitation to read Double Democracy. It is a free download, less than 60 pages for now, just in English, but translations may follow. You will find the link to the Internet Archive below. If you know the current system is failing and have no idea how democracy can still work, if returning the power to the people is possible at all, then you should read it. It doesn't pretend to solve all current issues. There is no such thing as a perfect way to govern the people. It doesn't expect to be implied as is either. The people decide what they want to imply. That is the core of the system, the core of double democracy.